Rabbi Yaakov Bechsera. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Be'ezrat Hashem will bless Baal HaBayit and Baalat HaBayit with bracha and tzlacha, siyata dishmaya gdola. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu Be'ezrat Hashem spill on them shefa bilidai. May this home Be'ezrat Hashem only hear the voices of Kol Sason ve'Kol Simcha. May Be'ezrat Hashem the entire Kehillah only gather in this home for smachot, and we all Be'ezrat Hashem hear from the family only besorot tavot. Amen. Kin Yatzon Be'ezrat Hashem. And for all the tzaddikim and tzaddikot that are here today, may Hashem bless all of you with bracha and tzlacha and a lot of siyata dishmaya. May we all, Be'ezrat Hashem, hear all our prayers, and may they all be heard and brought to fruition. And may we all, Be'ezrat Hashem, see a personal redemption and a redemption, Be'ezrat Hashem, for all Klal Am Yisrael. Amen. Kin Yatzon Be'ezrat Hashem. You know, Abotai, every year, when we get to this part of time of the year, we get very excited. Being that we are essentially, first of all, in the end of the year from a Jewish perspective, but also preparing for our one chance throughout the year, where there is the highest chance of Geula. Where Chazal teach us, Bnei Israel were redeemed in Nisan, in Chag HaPesach. The likelihood of a Geula is most likely to happen on that same date. So anytime we get close to such an opportunity, it excites us, but also puts us in a lot of stress. Because it means that we have an opportunity ahead of us that either we grasp and make it into something very special, or chas v'shalom, we do nothing, and this opportunity passes by and nothing happens from it. So every year, when we approach this time of the year, we try to think of ideas of how we could inspire ourselves, not only to act and prepare for a Geula, but also to understand what we should be doing in order to bring the Geula in a more substantial way within our life. The Torah, Baruch Hashem, is full of so many different things to do, and mitzvot, and obligations. It's very difficult to understand what should be the proper direction that we should all take from a mitzvah perspective, from a mental perspective, in order to truly say that we are well preparing ourselves, our families, and our world for a potential Geula. So today we're sitting and we're thinking of what could we learn from all the occurrences that we are going through, and especially like Chag HaPurim that is only so close, to try to get some sort of a hint, some sort of chizuk, some sort of a direction of what should be our focus in this time of the year. And we thought about a beautiful question. I think it's a question that can give us a lot of inspiration, hope, and hopefully Be'ezrat Hashem bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Throughout the last few parashot, there is like a common theme, and something that we even participate in Purim as one of the mitzvot of the day. And that is, we read about this mitzvah of Machatzit HaShekel. Machatzit HaShekel, we read it for a few weeks in a row. We read it even in the extra parashot that we read, like the Arba Parashiot. And we're going to somewhat try to imitate it at the time of Purim. But the mitzvah of Machatzit HaShekel is very, very unique. It's unique because it also doesn't make sense. And usually things that don't make sense are the best places to start. It means that there is some space that we can work to come to a place of a chidush, something new, something to delight us. Machatzit HaShekel is a mitzvah that came for two different reasons. The first reason being that Bnei Israel sinned with the golden calf. They brought the world back to its state of after the sin, where we know that Adam HaRishon sinned, sent havoc and destruction throughout all the worlds. Bnei Israel went to slavery to fix that destruction that occurred. And Bnei Israel, right at the time before they were supposed to receive the Torah and bring the world back to its original state, sinned with the worst sin, which was the golden calf. And they needed chapara. They needed a repentance. They needed a mitzvah. They needed something to do in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive them and to not punish them with the punishment that he had in plan, kiliyah, erase them. So there is the Machatzit HaShekel. One reason, to bring a forgiveness. The second reason, which is a little bit more odd, it's that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to count Bnei Israel. So the idea was, each one gives half a shekel. In the end of the day, you pile up all the half a shekels, and you count them. And when you count them, you'll come to a place of understanding of how many Jews there are. This mitzvah is very strange for a few different reasons. First of all, we learn only in a few weeks of what a person does when he does a sin. And it's very consistent. You bring a sheep, you do shechita, korban chatat, you do tshuva. There's a very, very simple step-by-step basis to come to a place of forgiveness. In this instance, the worst sin that any person did since Adam HaRishon is forgiven in the most easy and uncommon way. Half a coin, you give it, your hands are clean, and you could continue on in life. That's not what we are learning throughout the entire Torah. Tshuva seems so difficult. Suddenly it's easy. $50, finished. What is this strange chapara, this strange teshuvah? Another odd idea is that if your goal is to count Bnei Israel, you might as well do a full coin. Because halves are harder to count than a full coin. So you might say, because maybe there are poor and rich Jews, so you wanted to do a mitzvah that includes everyone, then do a penny. Do one full penny, each one will bring one full penny, and in that way, everyone will be represented by a full entity, and we will be able to count how many there are in Am Yisrael in a much easier fashion. But the Torah says no. Ha'ani lo yamit, v'ha'ashir lo yarbeh. Each one needs to bring specifically half a coin. Why? So there is clearly a lot of depth behind Machatzta Shekel, and it's something that we need to understand. So I would like Abotai to open all of our minds to a very, very deep teaching that I hope I don't lose everyone. But Bezrat Hashem, we're going to start. And I hope after the class, if there's something that is not clear, we can always save any questions and try to explain it. There's a beautiful teaching in one of the most deep books of Kabbalah, of the Ramak, of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. In his book, Pardes Rimonim, which discusses very deep concepts from how our bodies work to how our nishamot work, Gilgulim, the structures of the Olamot HaElyonim, very, very deep book. One of his gates in that book is what was always one of the most intriguing ones, just because of its name. It's called Sha'ar HaMitziut, the gate of reality. The goal of this gate was to try to explain to the readers the difference between our reality in this world, or at least how we perceive our reality to be, versus the reality of a creation being, whatever we want to call it, in Olamot HaElyonim. So we can already tell that it's a very whimsical idea because it's trying to express what it is to just be, what it feels to just exist, and to try to give us an idea of what it will be like La'atid Lavo. So the Ramak explains the difference between our reality and the reality above in the most simple way possible. He says the difference is that in our world there is masa umatan, we found a beautiful word in English for this, fungibility, something that's fungible. In Olamot HaElyonim there is no masa umatan. There is no concept of fungibility. This is very odd, because this seems to be very particular to one subject, where essentially the Ramak is saying that in this world, there is this concept of giving and taking, and in the world above, there isn't a concept of giving and taking. That doesn't express to us what it is to be in reality. So in order to understand this, the Ramak goes a little bit deeper. And he goes into the details of what it's like and how fungibility affects really most of our world around us. We can give a little analogy. The Ramak says, in our world, if a person has an object or a creation, you are able to trade. So if I was to come to the tzaddik and say I have a pen and the tzaddik has a paper, we can trade. In our world, being that all our creations are fungible, I can hand the pen, The tzaddik can hand the paper. I no longer have the pen, and the tzaddik no longer has the paper. But we're able to move a lot of things from hand to hand. The Ramak says in the world above, that's the crucial part of what's missing. And he gives an analogy of how this affects more of our life than we could imagine. This is his analogy, not mine. He says it's like if you take a sheep. And you want to take this sheep and you want to create a sweater out of it. So what do? You take the sheep and the first thing that you do, you shave it. After you shave it, you're left with two things. A bald sheep and a pile of hair. In order to start the process of creating something, you have to take the original parents of the creation that you want to create, and you have to essentially destroy it. To a certain extent. Where now the sheep gives from its fur and no longer has the fur that it gave. Being that the sheep is fungible and the sheep only has so much to give. Once it gives, it no longer has. So now the sheep is one big X, it's no longer the same. And now you have a pile of hair. The hair isn't a sweater yet. It's way early to call the hair just a sweater. So you have to take the hair and you have to start yarning it, making it into strings. In order to do so, you have to destroy the hair, make the hair no longer existent, in order to create strings. So the hair is no longer a thing within the world, but it passes on its resources to the next creation, a string. The string isn't the color that most people want. So it needs to be dyed. So the color of the sheep is usually like an off-white. You want to dye it light blue. You have to cancel its original form to let it step to the next stage. And onwards and onwards, in order for the initial sheep to turn into a sweater, it needs to repeat this process of being built up and being destroyed. And only down the line you can end up, after you get the strings, you make the sheets, and after you take the sheets, you cut the sheets, and after you take the cut sheets, you sew the sheets, only then you have a sweater. The creation, being the hair or the sheep, needed to recreate itself so many times in order for it to adapt to become something more rich. And every time it did so, it completely canceled its original form. To the point where if you were to give a person a sweater, you won't know how the sheep looked when that fur was on the sheep. Being that we live in a world that is fungible, that is graspful. The Zohar Kadosh says, the difference between our world and the world above, that it isn't graspful, it isn't fungible. Well, let's use that exact analogy of the sheep. The sheep gave its fur, stayed exactly the same. The hair made strings, the hair stayed exactly the same. And the creation is able to continue to adapt without changing its original form at all. Where you're able to see the evolution of a creation, being that every step of the way, it stayed the exact same. Being that it is not fungible, that it doesn't have a concept of size, of matter, of grasp. So it could continue to give and give and give and give and give and never change. The Ramak goes even further than that. It says where you see this very, very profoundly is the fact that in our world, as the creation advances, its root becomes less valuable. Which makes perfect sense. It's like if I was to come to the tzaddik and bring you a sheep and say, tzaddik, how do you like your sweater? You're going to look at the sheep and you're going to say, how am I going to? This is not a sweater. So I will tell you, no, this is the root of the sweater. The root of the sweater isn't the sweater. Being that in order for it to become something valuable, it needs to go all the way down the line, pass through so many different processes. And on the other hand, in Olam Ha'elyon, as you go further down the line to its root, the more valuable it becomes. And that's one of the main reasons why we say that when a person goes up to Shamayim, he has an instant emunah, an instant faith. You can't question HaKadosh Baruch Hu up there. Why? Because you see a creation, you see an angel. You see where that angel came from, all the way until it reaches to where? Till it reaches to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the root of where the creation came from will always be much more valuable than its down the line adapted and evolved and more complex creation. Whereas you go up in the sources, you reach to the Holy of Holies, Hashem Yitbarach. In our world, we have doubt and we have question because we don't see where the creation came from. And if we had a clear idea where the creation came from and it didn't need to destroy itself in order to evolve, we would all say, okay, this is very simple. Hashem exists. He created everything. He's the root of everything. There's no questions. The difference of our reality comes down to the simple fact of fungibility. What's very interesting is that we see that with worldly manners, we follow that same rule of our reality here. In spiritual aspects, in spiritual things, we suddenly follow a completely different set of rules. Not the rules of our world here. Rather, we follow the rules of Olamot Elyonim. And we have a beautiful analogy, a beautiful example that we can give. We said it's like we show everybody a photo of a big tzaddik. The biggest tzaddik that exists in the world. We put it on one side. Then we go on the other side and we have another photo. A photo of a child that is full of mud, 5 years old, dirty, looks like he's been in a very, very unclean environment. And he's holding a baby bird that its wings are broken. Beautiful picture, cute. I come to the tzaddik and I say, I come to everyone and I say, what do you think about the picture of the tzaddik? Everyone's going to say, it's the biggest tzaddik. What do you mean? It's extremely valuable. Then we're going to ask, what do you say about the picture of the child? And everybody will answer, wow, it's a beautiful picture of a child. And then we come and we say, these two pictures are actually what? The same person. Where the smelly, dirty child that's in the mud is that tzaddik as he grows. That picture of him as a child trying to help a baby bird that is injured, does it lower its value or does it higher its value? So the immediate answer is higher. Now you see where the tzaddik came from. You see that even as a kid, he was trying to help a bird that its wing was broken. But the picture is a child that is smelly, with no Torah, full of mud, full of dirt, holding an animal. Baruch Hashem, this red heart is We're looking at this picture of this child. It doesn't seem like it should add any value to a tzaddik that's full of Torah. But still it does. Because in spirituality, when you go back to the root, you find that its value goes higher as the creation continues to progress. We see this concept very clearly in the Torah with Avraham Avinu alav shalom. It said that Avraham Avinu alav shalom left his house of his father. And many of the Mefarshim, like the Ramban and Rashi, ask a question of how does this represent Avraham's duty of a tzaddik? Where Avraham had a father that needed taking care of at that time, and Avraham chose to leave his father and to leave the mitzvah of kivud av va'em to go on to do something else. There Chazal say that the reason that Avraham's leaving of his father was actually a beautiful thing was the fact that if Avraham was to go, to become somebody big, and to become somebody praiseworthy, and to do something good in the world, not only that it won't be considered as a defamation or a degrading of kivud av va'em, rather it will be the highest version of respecting the parents. Because as Avraham will grow, all the deeds that he did for his father as a kid won't diminish in value. Rather, will only go up. Being that spirituality, as you progress, doesn't cancel itself in any way, shape, or form. being that it's not a part of our world that has these fungible aspects and traits. The world that we live in is a world that when something gives, it no longer has, and when something receives, something else had to give. And this, Rabotai, gives sense to a beautiful, beautiful teaching in the book of Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, which was a big Kabbalist, talks about this famous pasuk in the Mishnah of Ki ha'adam hu etz asadeh, which always is a pasuk that stands out, being that there's no context to it. The Mishnah just says, man is the tree of the field. What does that even mean? What is that trying to represent? And what's the lesson from it? Not clear. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says that we are like the tree of the field, but it needs a little bit more explanation. And that is the fact that we are like a backwards tree. He will explain. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says that a tree is built from two different aspects. There is the higher tree, and then there is the lower tree. There is the tree that is very revealed, that sits in the sunshine. That's the part of the tree that we can see. The leaves, the flowers, the fruit, the branches. And then there is the more important part of the tree, which is not its branches, it's what? Its roots. Its roots we don't see. Its roots is a part that we are unable to have grasp of it, but it's also the source of its life. Hidden and protected from all the elements. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says, we are a tree backwards, where our roots are clearly not in the ground. Rather, our roots are where? Up there in Shamayim. We get our life from Shamayim. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says, take somebody and tell him, go destroy the tree. He can go and break the branch and rip the leaves, or even go as far as take a big garzen. What do you say garzen? Axe. And cut off the whole tree. Big damage, nachon? Not really. Because he only ruined what? The revealed part, the part that we see. But will the tree die? No, not necessarily. Because as long as where its life comes from is present and hidden and far away from the grasp of an individual, the tree will always grow back. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says that so too are we like the tree. Our world, we live in the revealed, but there's a whole side to an Adam, to a man that is hidden. Not hidden in our dirt of this world, but rather hidden in the dirt of the Malchut of the Shekhinah, up there in Shamayim. And that's what Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen explains of a famous pasuk that we say so many times throughout our day. V'kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek be'olam haba. That all Bnei Israel have a part, a portion in Olam Haba. The meaning of this pasuk, according to Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, is that no matter how much a Jew sins, and no matter how much a Jew destroys, and no matter how much a Jew's blemishes, even if he cuts off the entire tree, which the tree really disappears, he will always have a chelek in Olam Haba. His place in Shamayim will always be concrete, being that he doesn't have grasp to the roots. The roots, there's no access to them. They will always be protected. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen says, that's the explanation of Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba. Half of us is fungible in this world. Half of us can give and take, get destroyed or get repaired. But the other half doesn't have a concept of giving, losing, depleting. It's not fungible. It's spiritual. It doesn't have the same traits of things that exist in this world. Like we can use just another example. We take a Sefer Torah. And this is a big problem to anyone that manages the Bet Knesset. The bells fall all the time. These bells are a big problem. Even if someone steps on them and they no longer look like a bell. Being that even though they lost its form and lost its shape, they need to be in Gniza. Why they need to be in Gniza? Being that they were once upon a time a part of a Sefer Torah, They have Kedusha, even though they have no parchment or letters or mitzvot or whatever things that we associate to spirituality. Still, spirituality doesn't deplete. It doesn't move. It's unfungible. We said maybe we can say that these two teachings can give us a big hint to this concept of Machatzit HaShekel. Bnei Israel sinned with the worst sin since Adam HaRishon. They essentially cut off the tree. They destroyed everything that they could have in their body. To the point where Hashem wanted to destroy Bnei Israel. Wanted to erase Bnei Israel. Here Bnei Israel needed to prove that we are worth something that's not destroyable. They needed to bring some sort of rachamim, of mercy, to cause HaKadosh Baruch Hu to not follow through with destroying Bnei Israel. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu had an idea. He said Bnei Israel sinned so much. But even though they sinned to the worst degree, a Jew can only damage how much of himself? Half. The other half, he has no access to it. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, have every single Jew bring half a shekel. Machatzit a shekel. Have every Jew represent himself with the half that is still good. And if he represents himself with the half that is still good, there is still a complete half worth saving. We see that the idea of Machatzit a shekel was actually the most clever way of bringing a reparation for its sin. It was reminding to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Melech HaSharet, to the entire world that Bnei Israel, even though they fell to the lowest point of sin, half of us is untouchable. Half of us exists in Olam Ha'elyon. Half of us is unfungible. Half of us will always stay perfect. And if that's the case, how are you going to punish us? How are you going to destroy us? We're half good. We're half perfect. We're half new. We can learn from this teaching of Machatzit HaShekel that a Jew, no matter how down and low he falls with sin and with sitra acha and with impurity and with the troubles of our world, it's only half of the tree. The other half, where life comes from, can always not only continue to exist, but restore the rest. Restore the rest of the tree. Abotai, the teaching of Machatzit HaShekel is a reminder to every single Jew that no matter how far you fell in life, you are always still a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world and His Son. And as long as you have a side of true kingdomship in Malchut, there is nowhere for you to go but to fix and go back to our root, to return to where we came from, to go back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, being that we are still half perfect. And this, Rabotai, isn't just a concept of tshuva, of reminding ourselves that we can still do tshuva and come back to Hashem. This is even in every single part of a Jew's life. And we see this with the holiday of Purim in a more significant manner than we think. It says in the Midrash that we all know that in the end of the Megillah we read that Mordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech. No, what's that song? It's a song that Haman was embarrassed or humbled, we'll call it, by taking all the bigdei malchut, taking all the clothing of kingdomship, going to Mordechai, which was the Rav of Bnei Israel, and dressing him in kingdomship, and the crown and all the clothing of the king, which is also very odd, which we'll get to that in a minute. The Midrash says, by the way, that's what it says in the Megillah, but there's another detail that you should know. The detail is that Bnei Israel, when they heard that they were all going to be lashmid, la'arog, la'abed, to kill and to destroy the Jews, they were at the lowest point they can possibly imagine. They saw that just in a few days' time, the biggest Holocaust that ever happened at that point in time, at least, will come to fruition. So it says in the Midrash that all the Jews, what did they do? They went to their non-Jewish neighbors. And they told their non-Jewish neighbors, look, buy me as a slave, take me as a slave, and if I'm your slave, they're not going to kill me. I will be your property. So all the Jews gathered together and they said, let's all find slave owners that will take us in and will work, and at least we will stay alive. It said that Mordechai, when he saw this, he couldn't help himself. He quickly gathered all Bnei Israel. He brought them inside a Bet Midrash, and it said that he taught them 2 teachings. Number 1, the teaching of Kamitza. The teaching of the Kamitza is all the laws of a sacrifice of, God forbid, a very, very poor person. So, in the Torah, we learn that there are levels of sacrifice. You can do a sacrifice with a bull, with like a cow. If not that, you can do a sacrifice with a sheep. If you don't have the means to bring a sheep, you could do a sacrifice with like a chicken or a bird. If even that you cannot afford, you were able to bring like wheat, if I'm not mistaken, like chita, seora, it's like wheat or grains. And you were able to sacrifice it on the Mizbeach. So it says that Mordechai taught them the laws of Kamitza, which is the sacrifice of the poor. And then he taught them the halachot of tefillin. It says, as he finished the laws of tefillin, Haman banged into Bet Midrash, put the crown on his head, dressed him in the clothing of the king, and ran him around the city. This Midrash stands out in a very unique manner. Because first of all, who cares what he was teaching Bnei Israel if it doesn't have relevance? If you are saying a story about people, if there's no relevance to the story, you're not going to say, oh, when I met him, he was holding a cup, and then just kill it there. So there's no relevance to the teaching that he was teaching them, Kamitza and Tefillin. And second of all, what's the connection between the Jews becoming slaves to the korban of Kamitza and to Tefillin? And what's even more unique is he didn't even have the ability to finish his words, and a crown was put on his head. Something doesn't add up. There's too many leads to something very sweet, but nothing comes out of it. So what was really happening here? So there's a famous teaching that asks about, first of all, Kamitza. Let's understand Kamitza, and then we'll move to Tefillin. What is this Kamitza? So like we explained, it's the korban that is brought from the poor person. Many of Chazal have a lot of questions on this sacrifice. We know that Bet HaMikdash was a makom of malchut, of kingdomship, a place of kingdomship, not only from a spiritual level, it was the home of the Shekhinah, which the Shekhinah is called malchut, literally, meaning that's the name of the Shekhinah, the wife of Hashem, you can call it like, kingdomship, but also from a physical level, it was also kingdomship. Gold, silver, copper, leather, wine, blood, very kingdomship things. Being that Bnei Israel needed to honor the spiritual presence of kingdomship. Chazal ask, if that's a place of malchut, why bring grain? So you say, okay, it's to honor the Jew that doesn't have the ability to give. But doesn't that bring a blemish to the place? Doesn't that, God forbid, bring down the value of the place? If even you had to go as far as decorating the place physically to represent its spiritual presence, doesn't it bring some sort of like defamation to its kingdomship? Chazal say, no. The idea of Kamitza is actually a big lesson for Am Yisrael, where even the Jew that feels that he is small, that feels that he has nothing to give, that feels that he's at the lowest place possible, he must never forget that even him, he owns a part of Malchut. He has a part of kingdomship that he is attached to. That every Jew, no matter how low in the bottom of the bottom he stands, inside he is a king. Inside he is perfect. Inside he has, you can call it like, how do we say it when a person is grasped to the throne? Like someone that yoresh. Heir. He's an heir to the throne. So he's in a bad place right now. Who cares? A kingdomship that involves all the worlds belongs to him. He must have a participation in a place that represents kingdomship. The greatest proof of that is that we all wear tefillin on our head. Arizal, in the Rama Mipano, in the Ramak, in the Zohar, in the Gemara, in so many different places, when they talk about Tefillin Shel Rosh, they say that the Tefillin Shel Rosh is what? It represents Keter. It represents a crown. Where if we all wear tefillin, then we're all wearing crowns. And if we're all wearing crowns, we should remind ourselves on the fact that no matter how small we feel, or no matter how low we are all entities of kingdomship. We said, maybe we can say, this is the most appropriate lesson that Mordechai could teach. But they were about to give themselves as slaves. He gathered them all and he said, Rabotai, what are you doing? You feel low, you feel small, you feel hopeless, you feel like the person that has nothing to give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Remember, you are all grasp kingdomship. And what's the proof of that? The proof of that is that we wear our tefillin. And the tefillin should remind us more than anything of the crown. Immediately, he didn't even finish those words. What did Hashem prove to Bnei Israel? A man walked in with a crown on his head, and he places the crown on a person he's about to kill in a few days. It was a message to all of Israel. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget what you are meant to. And no matter how you feel right now, you have a part of you, half of you, which is pure kingdomship. This teaching couldn't have been more relevant to wake us up to understand that we are all sons and daughters of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And no matter what, we are still perfect inside. Now it makes so much sense why the month of Adar, which is the month of Purim, we say that it's the month of Yosef. Where we even say, we all know Purim is the fish is Ben Porat Yosef, Ben Porat Ale'ayin. Yosef was what? Yosef was sold as a slave. Yosef was thrown from one place to the other. Yosef was put in a jail cell. Chazal say, our sages teach us, that no matter what Yosef went through, he had always his head up. Because he said, I'm a slave now, but I'm the son of Yaakov, son of Yitzchak, son of Abraham, the chosen one of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So no matter where I will go at life, I hold my place and I know where I stand. Yosef, throughout all his years of suffering, always was able to represent a Jew that knows who he is inside out. And because he knows who he is, he's not going to fall to any dark place, whether it be sadness, whether it be impurity, whether it be sin. He values himself. Even at those years when he was in jail, and even those years that he was a slave, and even those years that he was going through all those suffering, he still prevailed. I would even go further to say that Yosef is the individual that shows us that when we act and remember that we share a crown on our head, not only that we convince ourselves that, but rather we convince the world around us that that is the case. Where when we honor our half that is perfect, and when we honor where we came from, and when we honor where we are, others do too. And there's a beautiful story in the Midrash that I don't know why it's not more famous. That always when we hear it, we have shivers in our body of how beautiful and incredible it is. It says, and this is really a proof of what this month is all about. It says that Yosef HaTzadik, the one who proved that if you believe that you have a crown, you make others believe so too. When Yaakov Avinu, his father, passed away, the first thing that he did was fulfill the swear that he made to his father, that what? That he will be buried in Eretz HaKodesh. So it says that when Yaakov passed, he quickly gathered all his brothers, Shvatim, and he said, look, we made a swear, we have to honor it. So we stop everything, and we take Yaakov right now, our father, to Eretz HaKodesh. It says that all Egypt respected Yaakov to the highest degree. So all the heads and the generals and the leaders, the mayors, whatever it was at that time, because Egypt was very big, all said, we're going to accompany you in honor of Yaakov Avinu. It says that Yaakov and his brothers understood that it's not respectful to travel with Yaakov and an army and swords and vessels of war. So they said, we're going minimal. 12 brothers, the heads of Egypt, zeu. No slaves, no army, no any pamalia, no entourage of any sort of kind. It says that when they left Egypt and they started to cross the desert, rumors started to spread very quickly. The rumor that the king of Egypt, Yosef, and the 12 tribes are traveling in the most vulnerable way possible. It says that all the kings of Canaan gathered together and they said, Rabotai, we have an opportunity at hand. There are these 12 brothers, which were the biggest headache of ours for all these years, because we know that the tribes were warlords. Shimon and Levi, 13 years old, they killed 24,000 people of Shechem. In one day, they slaughtered an entire city, 13-year-old boys. We know that it says that Yehuda, when he was going through that argument with Yosef, he said, no problem, Yosef, you want to take Binyamin, that's fine. You will destroy one gate, you will destroy one gate, you will destroy one gate. I will destroy 3. Today we collapse Egypt. 9 or 10, at that point it was 10. 10 brothers destroy Egypt in one day. How is that even possible? It's possible. We did many classes about this because they were more than just people. They had the help from above. We're not going to get into it. These 12 brothers were like a big kotz, like a thorn in everybody's neck. Because they knew that if, God forbid, the Shvatim decide to fight them, no matter how much the numbers don't make sense, they're going to win. And then you have a cherry on top. The king of Egypt, the core of all the wealth and food and power of the world, is also traveling. So all the kings of Canaan, enemies with one another, said we need to get together, make peace for a moment, gather all our army and resources, and now that they are mourning, they are sad, they have no excitement, they have no happiness, they have no soldiers, they have no vessels of war, we attack and we kill them. So it says that hundreds of thousands of soldiers gathered from every corner of the land. And they all marched towards where they knew that Yaakov's body and Yosef was traveling. At the time, kings, leaders, are not like leaders of today. Today, the leader hides behind his army and he lets the army go in suicide. At the time, there was honor. So the kings would stand in the forefront and they would show their people of how to act and to fight. It was a real motivation. So it says that all the kings of all the lands were standing in a line. And they were marching with behind them hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And suddenly they reached the group, the shayara, we'll call it the group of Yosef and his brothers. And the Midrash says they stopped. They told their armies, hold. And the Midrash said there was complete silence. They looked at Yosef and the body of Yaakov. It says they came down from their horses. They dropped their swords. They walked up to the body of Yaakov and removed their crowns. Chazal says, what did they see that made them change their plan? It says that when the kings were looking at the group, something didn't make sense. They said, where is the king of Egypt? The king of Egypt isn't here. Yosef isn't here. They're looking around. They see everybody's heads are clear. And there's no crown of the king of Egypt. And a king never takes off his crown. It's one of the king's things that make him into a king. His crown. Until they realized, they looked around, and they realized that the crown of Yosef was where? It was put on the box of Yaakov. It says that when the kings saw this, it shook them to their core. They said, the king is willing to take down his crown for their father? We must stop. They walked up to the body of Yaakov, removed their crowns, and the Midrash says they placed them on top of the crown of Yosef. And not only that they didn't fight the brothers, they accompanied them to bury Yaakov. We see, Rabotai, that a lot of the times we think that by honoring others and trying to appeal to everyone, that's how we're able to pick ourselves up from a low place, from a place of sadness, from a place of sin, from a place of darkness. In reality, Rabotai, what we need to do is honor the crown that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. and honor where it came from, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And only when we do so, only then, not only that we honor ourselves and we're able to pick ourselves up from that low place, to allow the tree to grow from its roots, but also we're able to convince the entire world around us of who we are, of where we come from, and what our job is here meant in our world. So if there's any sort of lesson that we can learn from Machatzit HaShekel, from the whole story of the Megillah, from Mordechai, that a Jew's position within this world is always a son and an heir to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And no matter what the prince does, his father will always have a place ready and home for him. And I think, Abatai, this is the greatest preparation for the month of Nisan. It says, at Arba'a Rashi Shana Yesh, there are 4 beginnings of the year. One of them is Pesach. It says Pesach is Rosh Hashanah le Melachim. It's the beginning of a new year, of a new start for who? For kings. Who's kings? Let's try to think of who is kings in our world. And the answer, Rabotai, is each and every one of Bnei Israel. Because as long as we have that half that we can't change, touch, or disconnect from, we all have a grasp in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingdomship. And as long as we have a grasp in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingdomship, we will all be able to reach to the month of Nisan, to reach to Chag HaPesach, and hopefully, Be'ezrat Hashem, begin a new beginning in our world as all kings, princes, and princesses in the new world to come. So may HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Be'ezrat Hashem, bless us all with bracha and etzlacha, siyata dishmaya gdola. May we all, Be'ezrat Hashem, get closer to our roots, and hopefully, Be'ezrat Hashem, all come to a place of a complete geula shelema, v'mera b'yamenu amen, k'diyat son Be'ezrat Hashem. Is there any questions, Rabotai? Questions.
The Machatzit HaShekel, it's to the kapara for which half?
Ma?
Which half is doing the...
Machatzit HaShekel.
Because you said there's a good half and the bad half.
Not a bad half.
Well,
a half that could be lost and a half that can't be lost. That's the idea.
So the kapara is for the half.
So it wasn't even chapara. It was a reminder. Because the reality is we're still fixing the sin of the golden calf. If we fix the sin of the golden calf, we would go back to the time of before the sin of Adam, which is eternal life, bracha, geula, etc. So clearly the half that is broken, we're still fixing. Machatzit HaShekel was a reminder of Hashem. You can't erase me. You can't get rid of me, because half is still perfect. And it's sort of hinted by Moshe's response. Moshe says, listen Hashem, you're not going to forgive Bnei Israel? What does Moshe say? Then go ahead, erase me. You can't. I'm unfungible. So if you're not going to erase me and you can't erase me, how are you going to erase Bnei Israel? So the idea of the Machatzit HaShekel wasn't even chapara. We had to say it's chapara because everyone knows it as chapara, but Machatzit HaShekel is more of, Hashem, give me a chance to fix. Because remember that half of me is still good. So it's not like I'm working with a majority of bad. I'm working with half good and another half that needs to be fixing. But half cup full, half perfect. Is there any other questions? No questions. Usually we say if there's no questions, there's two outcomes. Either it made perfect sense or made no sense. No questions? Oh Hashem. Hashem bless us. Huh? May Hashem bless us all with bracha and etzlacha, and we all, Be'ezrat Hashem, see a flipping of all our challenges into a complete geula shelema. Amen. Be'ezrat Hashem.